about the table, who were managed on the day by their assistant head coach, Jason Tindall, because Eddie Howe is recovering, having been put in hospital on Friday. We wish him all the very best. But the team gave him the best possible boost that they could have done.
Yeah, it's really turned back round for Newcastle in a way, like they're now putting in those kind of performances where you can see they've got momentum finishing the season with everything that's happening. I think it's vital that they get, like they do, try and get themselves in the Champions League. Winning that trophy, I think, is giving them the confidence now to go forward. And I look at Newcastle as a place now where people will want to go there. I think that there was a period where people were saying, "Oh, what's happening with Eddie? Is he going to leave?"
You need to sign for the club, not to play again.
To sign for the club now. I think that, because I think it's quite disrespectful people saying about Isak and who's going to buy Isak. And I think they could probably keep Isak and bring the quality in, like we're seeing with Tonali. But I like the way it's switched around with Eddie, because I'm sure that when Newcastle got taken over, people thought there was going to be a lot of money spent. It hasn't worked like that, and he's built a really good team. And then winning that trophy and playing like they're playing and finishing with the momentum, I hope they do make it.
And the question was, after winning the Carabao Cup, after such a long wait for a trophy, was how will this affect them? Will they be a team that thinks, do you know what, we've peaked for this season and they kind of coast to the end? Or are they a team that has that proper mentality to go forward and build on that success? And that's exactly what they've done, Rachel.
It seems that way, and I think they're finding that little bit of momentum at the right time. I think the run-in's going to be really, really tough for all the teams that are in the mix. But if you're going to go into that, you want to go into that with the good feelings. And I think they've got a collective good feeling. They've got that trophy, that's great. But there's also little nice stories in amongst it. And I think when you're a close-knit team, those little stories, the likes of Dan Burn getting in the England team. I think Jacob Murphy's been a revelation. You've got Harvey Barnes, few injuries, come back in, contributing. All these little things, when you're in a good moment, they lift you up again, so that they're in a really good place.
Yeah, and in a really good place, as Wrighty says, to keep hold of some of those big players. I mean, Wrighty's mentioned a couple, Rachel's mentioned a couple, and that's the thing, is whether they can build long-term on that success and on what looks like a Champions League finish.
I think that's the thing. They are a really good team. Of course, Isak might be the individual that people look at, but as a team, their midfield's great. Defensively, they're great. Their forward line links up so well, despite the injuries here and there. And they've come right at the right time of the season. There's been moments where it's been a little bit shaky, but they're looking strong. And as we mentioned, 5 places confirmed Champions League, 1 trophy, Champions League qualification. I mean, that would have been a great season for them.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to see how they've built that side at Newcastle, because they've brought players in. They've got players who are playing in different positions. But as Mayowa said, it's about the links in each of those different areas of the field, particularly that midfield three who can be really defensive or incredibly creative, depending on what's required.
When you look at, obviously Tonali coming in and the injury at the start, so we didn't see him. We're seeing him now. I didn't realise. He's 24. I didn't realise he was this good, as good as he is. When you look at his defensive work, his energy up and down, obviously his finishing as well. And then, obviously with Bruno as well. When you look at him and Bruno, it really does look like a midfielder. If you can just add a Declan Rice kind of energy to that midfield with them too, you can see a lot of creativity alongside someone like Isak up front. And then, like I'm saying, Kelsey, the players that they can attract. Newcastle are now looking like a place, because it's such a vibrant, unbelievable place, that you would want to go to. It is very attractive. They play very good football. And again, I thought Tonali was outstanding yesterday.
And the fitness levels as well, because Eddie Howe's always demanded that from his teams. And you get to this stage of the season, and that's where you see the rewards of it. If everybody in European and Champions League qualification were to win all their remaining fixtures, Newcastle would finish in 3rd. That can't happen because they're all playing each other, so it's not possible. But because of those head-to-heads, Rachel, that's why this momentum that Newcastle got and this feel-good factor that they've got around them, that's why it's going to be so important that they're all pulling for each other against teams that might just be starting to come off the rails a bit.
Oh, it'll be huge. And we've seen that throughout the season, lots of different teams, that little momentum. But when you're in the wrong side of it, like Chelsea, a few question marks there. It's so difficult to just turn the tide, and you have the team meetings through the week and you chat things through and you sort of do that thing where you're like, no, we'll be fine, this weekend. And then the weeks start chipping away and you're like, we're running out of weeks here. And I think Newcastle, like we said, they're in a really good place. I think Villa are also in a good place. There's a few teams like that, and I know that Newcastle and Villa face each other this coming weekend. So there's just lots of big games, which is exactly what we want.
Yeah, huge games. And Newcastle's game in hand will come in midweek against Crystal Palace. So by the middle of the week, they'll all have played the same number of games, which just means it's nicely settled and kind of is a little bit more predictable as we get to, not in terms of results, but in terms of what those results mean. It's a little bit easier to decipher as we get towards the end of the season. Wrighty was talking about Isak and what the future holds for some of those big name players for Newcastle. Do you feel that an assist yesterday, and a really lovely assist yesterday from Alexander Isak. So is there a sense that he is a Newcastle player for the foreseeable future, or is there a sense that other clubs will be interested and that he may be tempted?
I think Wright hit the nail on the head. There's obviously going to be loads of clubs interested in the striker of that profile. I mean, the goals speak for itself, but it's the way he plays football. It's infectious, and the Newcastle fans love him. But Newcastle's project isn't one that you'd necessarily jump ship for. They are really building something that could be sustainable. We're looking at a trophy and Champions League finish this year. Who's to say that they can't push on further with more reinforcements? And I think for you to be the face of that franchise is a draw that you won't necessarily get at many other clubs. We've seen loads of strikers in recent years make moves and it's not necessarily landed or taken them where they want to go. So I think there's no rush for him to leave this season. He could do another year. And I mean, if they bring in some signings, they could be a real force in the season.
Well, that's what you want to see from Newcastle now, is because it's starting to get to that place where they just need to start bolting certain players on. You have to say with Tonali, with Guimaraes, even Botman when he comes back, you have to say they've got a spine that you could probably easily work with. But I also feel that with the people like Isak being convinced to stay because we're going to bring this, you know, I feel that he's somebody, he'd stay. Why wouldn't you stay at Newcastle? He felt it there with the winning of the trophy and that. He can see the energy there, and he's young enough to give it another couple of years. It's up to Newcastle if they can match the fact that anyone who wouldn't take him, you know, you wouldn't take him. So they've got to show a lot of ambition to keep him, I think.
Well, what's your thoughts looking at it and in terms of where Newcastle are, where Newcastle might be going, and whether Isak's part of that?
Honestly, I think if they get Champions League this year, which they've got a great chance to, I think that is a big swing. Because I think as a player, especially a striker, typically they want to play for the top clubs. You want to break records, you want to win trophies, you want to be at the best clubs. Well, if you're at Newcastle, who have a huge history, are a huge football club, and you're in the Champions League, and you're in the big competitions, you've won silverware, I think there's less reason to then want to leave. I think if Newcastle this season ended, you know, in the top half, but not in those spots, I think that brings more questions for him. You know, does he consider those big moves? Because reality is when teams come in for you and there's big money on the table, everyone at home sits and goes, well, I wouldn't go because I love the club and I love this. But when you're in it and that's on the table, it's really hard to decipher. And that's when your personal situation comes into it. And I think he seems really happy from the outside. And I think if they've Champions League, I think he's happy to stay.
I think it all comes down to, like you mentioned, personal for him. And you know, they're gonna have to try and convince him. And then he's gonna have to see it with the people they sign. But like, you're gonna be ambitious as a striker. You want to be playing for the teams that are challenging on a regular basis for the big honours. And I think that if Newcastle don't tie it down soon, then I think someone will come and get him, and then they might be able to tempt him away. That's why I think Champions League's vitally important for Newcastle as well. Just like I think it's vitally important for any team who can be in there at the minute.
I mean, you talked about the profile of Isak, and obviously we see the goals. We saw the assist yesterday. There's more to him than that. So tell me a bit more about that and where he match, or who he would match with, you think?
It's rare to see a striker that direct. Like, his dribbling ability is unquestionable. He's able to just weave and bob through defenders. He knows how to find the goal. And even though he seems quite slight, he's incredibly strong. You see him hold off defenders. He links up so well. He's a total striker. A lot of people probably misprofile him as a finisher, but he can do everything that needs to be done. We're seeing Jacob Murphy's benefiting from having someone that has that sort of movement, but you're seeing people like Tonali pop up and get more goals because you've got someone that's creating those spaces for you. So I don't think there's a team that he can't go to. We often say in football that it's all about partnerships. Eddie Howe's managed to make a team that his midfield serve him really well, and he serves his wide men really well. It doesn't matter who's on the wing. Harvey Barnes can come in, he plays well. Jacob Murphy on the side plays well. So ultimately, he's the profile striker you need in modern day football. gets around the pitch, gets goals, and brings everyone else in.
He's the only
Who needs a striker, Wrighty?
Funny you should say that, Kels, because I was going to say, watching him against Saliba and Gabriel Magalhaes was
torture.
He gave them a torrid time because they didn't know. He could pick the ball up, he could pick the ball up and run at them. He could back into them and people can run off of him and he can link the play. He can run beyond them and score. It was like watching it was like, I remember like me and Al were texting afterwards about watching a centre forward like this is very, very exciting because you don't see it, especially against the top defenders in this league. You don't see them get run around. You don't see them get run ragged. And to watch my two centre halves get run ragged like that is the reason why he's probably linked with us, because there's no way Saliba and Gabriel Magalhaes is not saying to Mikel, what we do, we've got to go and get that guy.
That's how it works. To Virgil as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
So the Liverpool boys are probably thinking, we need him.
Yeah. That's how it works, Kels. When you've got someone like him, he can do everything in the way he's playing. This is why Mayowa is absolutely right about he's not really needing anyone particularly with him to play off. He's got a decent midfield to play off him. Wingers who look to put the ball in the box because he's a great header as well. He could fit into most systems, and then probably you change your system a bit for him.
They're in a really good position at the moment, Newcastle. Their tails are up. They've got teams around them to face between now and the end of the season. If they do that, they'll easily qualify for the Champions League, and they've got players who are absolutely in form, and they may well be able to keep hold of them if they qualify for the Champions League this season. Also, as you said, Aston Villa in a great position. I mean, look, they were playing Southampton, who have not had the best of seasons by any stretch of the imagination. They were managed to miss 2 penalties in that game as well, and still came away with the 3-0 win.
Yeah, they did. I actually think it was a really difficult game to go into psychologically. Obviously, it's in between these two legs against PSG. You go to Southampton, bottom of the league, relegated. The only good outcome there is if you win comfortably. Everyone else at home is going, you have to win comfortably. So even if you win comfortably, it doesn't feel that good because you're thinking, oh, thank goodness that's done. So I think it was a tough one, that journey as well. It was a quick sort of period of recovery, go again, get the mindset right for the league, to then know you've got to get the mindset quickly changed back to Champions League. So I think it was a little bit tricky, and I think in the end, Villa did show that they've got that depth and quality, and that's why they're where they are this
You know
season.
something, Kels? I think if you could have picked a team to want to play in between those, you probably would pick Southampton. But even going into it mentally, you're still thinking we've got to get this done.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that Villa done it very well because I feel they've got a massive task. I feel like their season and what they're doing in the Champions League, there's a lot hinging on it. Like I'm talking about Newcastle and attracting players to go to the next level. I think Villa are not a million miles away from doing exactly the same thing in respect of where they want to be with getting into the Champions League. So I think that it's going to be a tough one against PSG. But like we know that Villa Park can get really great and rowdy, and it's going to need that because I think it's going to be a tough game for them with PSG with their tails up at the minute, I think.
Yeah, that game against Newcastle at the weekend is going to be absolutely crucial to what happens to Aston Villa, and certainly in terms of how it feels for them going towards the latter stages of the season. But in terms of their next few games, they've got that deficit against PSG, which is going to make things very difficult, even though they're going to be at Villa Park for that one. But in terms of qualifying for the league, Opta have said at the moment they've got the lowest percentage of the teams in the race of finishing in the top 5 because they've got really difficult fixtures coming up.
Yeah, the fixtures coming up are not favourable in comparison to everyone else, and of course football's a funny game, anything can happen. I think the great thing about them is the narrative of that victory against Southampton. Your substitute scoring goals does something for you. It means that anyone can come in and have a partner season, and we know that Emery's a coach that really knows how to draw on players, and this is the moment where he's going to have to do that the most because they're up against it and people are writing them off. They've been written off against PSG, they've written off a top 4. Now can he really galvanise that feeling of let's show people why we're constantly in these conversations, because they're a great side and no one expects them really to be here. I mean, you bring in 2 loan players.
To be honest, that doesn't look too bad after Newcastle and Manchester City. They look kind of winnable games, but Palace are tough to play against. Fulham can cause problems for a lot of teams.
And
Bournemouth are not easy. And then
Bournemouth
it gets tougher again on the other side of it.
Fulham ultimately are still trying to play for European football themselves. So all of those games still have jeopardy there for them. So it's about who wants it more and how he can really extrapolate those performances. And they've got a few players that can step up. They've got players coming back from injury. Onana looks like he's fit again, which is big for them. So we'll see how it goes. I still rank their chances quite highly.
But also, Rachel, it goes back to the point you made about it being a tricky game against Southampton because you might not be 100% focused? Because you think, well, it's Southampton, and they should be straightforward, even if that's only a subconscious thought. But in some ways, can it be easier when you've got tough teams coming up, just to kind of keep you on track mentally?
I think there is a thing to say to that when they come consistently, because you stay in that place of, you know, that real motivation of I need to be at my best, which turns into your day-to-day training, which drives the people around you, because there'll be different people at this point in the season who'll be feeling different elements of fatigue and emotions. So when you've got everyone kind of at it day to day, and that can really bring you up too. I think going to sort of that Palace game, I think Palace is a tricky fixture, but it's also at Wembley, and it's also a cup game, and I think that can have a similar impact. Okay, it's a semi-final, but it can have a similar impact if Villa get a good result. It comes at a really good time. And I think you want to be in these games. A player, these are the games
exactly
you want.
right, Rach. Yeah, these are the games you want to be playing in, Kels. At this end of the season, you want to be ideally at the top end of the table fighting for something, and that's what drives you now, whether it's FA Cup games, whatever games it is. If you're playing against teams around you, you've just got to be trying to win these games as well, just to get into that top 5.
Do you know what? I'm seeing that a lot with Manchester City at the moment, that suddenly it feels like they've got something to play for. There's a bit of jeopardy. Those Champions League places weren't looking quite as assured as they have, certainly previous seasons, but even at stages of this season. And suddenly, not only have they kicked into gear, but just as Kevin De Bruyne announces that he's leaving at the end of the season, he puts in a classic Kevin De Bruyne performance as well.
Well, the thing is that, you know, all season we were waiting for the City run, weren't we? But obviously this is the season, it's not going to happen. But they've got so much quality, they've got so much capability. And then obviously, like you mentioned there, Kels, that Kevin De Bruyne's doing his farewell tour kind of like thing. So everybody's kind of stepping up. Everybody wants him to finish on some kind of high, especially with the highs they've had for the whole of the time he's been there. So you'd have to expect Manchester City to be in and amongst it, you know, with everything they've done. And so, as much as it's going to be a shame to see him go, the fact is that Man City, they have to be in Champions League. They have to be there. That's why I put them there to get there,
And they will feel that as well. But I just think it's very interesting come this stage of the season. As Wrighty said, we've been waiting for Manchester City to kick into gear, and it hasn't come. Suddenly, they've got something to actually get their teeth into.
It's exactly this. Pep is always looking at a way to try and get the most out of his team, and KDB saying that he'll be leaving is exactly that. I think there's multiple things. It's one, KDB showing why he has been who he has been in the Premier League, but also there's a sense of pressure on the rest of the players to be like, there's a space to fill, and who's going to step up. Marmoush has been excellent since coming in, but people are watching closely to see who is going to step up when this magnitude of a player disappears. So they've got that momentum, and it's easy to forget that they actually did go 2-0 down as well, but they've got that bite back that no matter what happens, we've got superior quality, we are a good team, we can bounce back, and that should see them through. I don't see them not getting Champions League. I think out of all the teams, that is one that I would bank on to get Champions League.
But it's also about how they rebuild the team in order to compete in the Champions League next season. And as you said, Mayowa, that there's already signs from Marmoush in particular, who looks like he's going to be the player to be able to play at that level that City have done consistently. Yeah,
he looks a great talent, and he's got that threat about him. But I think probably the decision to let Kevin De Bruyne leave is one that I think they might think about down the line. I think we saw at the weekend what he can bring. He said after the game actually how it's one of the first times he's played in such a long time where he's not been feeling the pain. And I think maybe some hasty decisions have been made because that weight you play with, the emotion of your contract and also the weight of them playing with injury is something that does wear you down. And to see the quality he had, he was fundamental in almost every goal they scored. And there was other moments they should have scored more, and he was still at the centre of those two. I think he will be a huge miss, maybe a miss that I'm not saying they're underestimating, but I think it will take a lot for them to find someone that can
you know
bring
what,
anything close to it.
You know what, Kels? I don't think that it's just. I think it's probably his decision. The club will probably keep him, but then you look at Kevin De Bruyne. He's been through all of the great times with Pep. Emotionally, physically, he must be drained. He must be finished now, and this is an opportunity for him to go. I think that Man City, Rach, will definitely probably say, just stay and shepherd it through. But I think he needs to move now, just like we've seen, like even someone like Kyle Walker move on, and like he's getting ready to move on now. It's just a case of like maybe they're done physically and mentally in that situation. Because remember, City have got to find what they were doing before the last 4 or 5 years, They've got to build this team to do it again, and you've got to be there at the start of that one as well. That must be too much for him to even think about, I think, especially under Pep.
But it's so lovely that we're getting to see him at his very best and playing pain-free before he leaves the Premier League. Because, you know, there have been times when he's been struggling to come back from injuries and then he's not been fully fit, and he's kind of... There was talk about his form dipping this season. So for him to go out on a high is going to be fantastic, not just for City fans, but for people who've loved watching him in the Premier League. So it was a good weekend for City, good weekend for Villa, good weekend for Newcastle in terms of Champions League qualifications. Champions League qualification is really hotting up, and this is the part of the season when your form needs to be on point. That was not the case this weekend for Nottingham Forest. That's 2 defeats in a row for them. And Chelsea did get the draw, but they had to come from 2-0 down against Ipswich at Stamford Bridge in order to do it. And look, we're going down to Aston Villa purely because numbers and time and all that kind of thing. But there's still a chance. I mean, 6 points is a lot for Fulham to make up. But they do have that game in hand. So they might well yet be in the conversation if they have a late run, particularly with there being 5 Champions League spots. But let's talk about Nottingham Forest and the fact that it is 2 defeats on the bounce, and also the manner of the defeat by Everton this weekend as well. That it was at such a late win, and the fact that Everton almost out-forested Forest.
Well, that's probably what would have surprised Nuno at this stage with everything they're going for. This part of the season, that would have probably worried him more than anything else, because the more I was watching the game, the more you could see the Everton players get more and more confident and they just kept going at them, bam, and in the end, Onana scores that really good goal. And I think that, remember when they lost, was it like 7-0? Was it? They lost 7-0, and a week later they won.
They bounced back.
So there's with the mentality of there's something that's not quite working out properly, because at the moment, you'd have thought that game against Everton, of course, Everton, you look at Everton's is really riding off into the sunset, lovely to their new stadium. It looks really nice. It's the kind of game, if I was in the Forest dressing room, I'd say, let's really go at them because they're safe, they feel good in that, and let's just finish this early, really go at. And they didn't do it. In fact, Everton done the opposite to them. They put them under the kind of pressure that they almost thought like, oh, we'll have to save it till next week.
So are you saying it's the recovery from last week's defeat that's most concerning about this defeat by Everton, rather than the game itself, if you know what I mean?
No.
So what you're saying is that when they've had a bad defeat, they've gone on, they've had a really convincing win. Yeah, so it's the recovery from last week's defeat.
Yeah, but then I thought that.
Worrying. Is that what
but Kels, what I was thinking, when they got that hammering, I thought that would have been the reset for them to continue to build and not drop below a certain standard after they come back. And I think they won 5-0. And then when you're looking at this game at home against an Everton side that playing for nothing, you know, you'd have thought that they've really put
5-0 defeat. 7-0 win.
That's what it was. That's what it was. 5-0 defeat, 7-0 win. But I thought that it's the kind of game that you said, right, let's really crush them at home so as we can relax and move forward with what we're doing. Like you're saying, go for Arsenal, you know, go to try and catch Arsenal rather than saying, OK, we'll sneak past them and go and batter everyone, especially at home.
I think that's part of it, right? No one expected Forest to be here. And the conversation has been, well, surely they're going to make it now. And I think with the semi-final on the horizon, there seems a sense of just sort of balancing where you are. But if you look at Arsenal's results, they've probably had the opportunity to capitalise and get even closer. And in this business end of the season, you just have to keep riding the wave, don't you? And I think water's got a little bit turbulent. 2 losses isn't ideal. They have had injuries here and there, but they really need to nip it in the bud, because it just becomes a gradual drop where now you're looking over your shoulder.
The momentum goes the other way,
Exactly, and it's unfortunate because they've had a great campaign. The way they've played has been amazing. You've seen so many players step up to the mantle. This is where they need to double down and make sure that they can get the results, because they've ground them out really well. You have to do it now.
This is why I think Nuno will probably be disappointed with that, because you want to show a little bit more strength in this, mental strength, Rachel, in this period with everything they're going for.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is almost we're getting to that point for virtually the whole season. Everyone's gone, it's going to come to an end for Forest. It's going to come to an end. And then sort of a couple of weeks ago, everyone's gone, it's not. Forest, they're really good. I've loved Forest this season. And I feel like almost maybe they're going, no, can we go back to stage and think this could happen? But I think maybe one slight shift mentality for the players is, you know, you take the game at the weekend, 0-0, they get a corner. It's a mistake from Marilla, who's been unbelievable.
Those
are the moments, though, I think earlier in the season, their mindset was, we categorically, under no circumstances, do we lose this game. And I think those little mistakes, in that moment, they're thinking, oh, we're playing Everton in the bottom half, we should be winning. And it's just a little bit of concentration, those little moments. And I think they need to just, to steady the ship, go back to, we don't lose the game, we don't lose the game, because they've got players that how they play in that transitional moment, they create great opportunities for themselves. They've got strikers that can finish. They don't need a lot of chances to win games. So can they just have that solid structure? Don't let teams through, don't let teams score, and know that you'll get chances. And I think that will give them back to that mentality of, we will get the points we need, but it's going to be difficult.
I think that might be one of the most important points, the fact that they've operated within such fine margins that it doesn't take much for that to swing in the opposite direction. And it just comes down to, like you said, one mistake that you get punished for, whereas, 95 times you might get away with it. But if you're operating in that kind of one goal advantage sort of area, it doesn't take much in football in a low-scoring game to tip it.
You see the thing with Rach makes a good point. The fact is, because they're at the business end of the season with going for Champions League, FA Cup, they're right at the end, and at this level, at this end of it, you can't make those kind of mistakes. And this is where you find out, and this is where I say where Nuno will be a little bit disappointed with the mentality of it, because he wants to find out now which one of his players is ready for this level. So I'll keep him, I'll bring him in to come with, because they should be reveling in this and, happy that Everton are coming so we can absolutely hammer them and show that we're ready to go to that next step. And I think that what we've seen is a weakness in the mentality at this stage of the season, which a lot of people don't have to deal with, because Forest, we didn't expect them to be there. Didn't expect them to be there as long as they have. And for you to stay there, Kels, you have to have a certain mentality, because it has to be about winning, and winning ruthlessly to keep it going, to frighten other people. And I think that at the moment, that's where they're lacking.
I wonder if Forest fans would take an FA Cup and 6th place.
It would still be disappointing.
For a club that has that European history, and from
FA Cup
everything that...
final, you're saying...
we've got one Forest fan who's working as part of our team today who says, yes, I would take that. Yeah.
The thing is...
I think
it would still hurt in the moment.
It would feel, wouldn't it, at the end of the season, because you'd still have to go and win that trophy.
I wouldn't feel so bad if I...
But it's 2 games rather than, 6.
I wouldn't feel bad if I got to the FA Cup final and won it, and then you finish 6th, because... No one's expecting Forest to be where they are, so they can build on that and have a trophy to build on for next season. So I'd probably, if I'm a Nottingham Forest fan, I'd take it, Carl,
City.
But only the win.
Having had the chat about City that we had earlier on.
Yeah.
Sort of thinking, well, maybe the better opportunities.
Exactly.
Just a quick word. I know we're talking about Champions League qualification, but if we started the table when David Moyes took over at Everton, they'd be right up there as well. They'd be 5th in the table. And they've been extraordinary. And it's not major surgery. They haven't changed anything hugely. It just feels like an attitude, an approach. What do you think?
So to bring him back, obviously, to steady that ship, knowing the players, and the way he wants to play. And remember, his journey as a manager, he's come back to Everton at a time where he's all-seeing, all-knowing now with Everton, so they'll say whatever he wants, he'll probably get them to do it. And the players have bought into it because they can trust him. He's an experienced manager that's got them playing. He's got individual players. You have to mention, I'd mention Beto, obviously, as being a striker. And just his form and seeing how they've changed, got the ball to him earlier, got him running onto things and that, changes the whole dynamics of the team. You can run them up the field, take some chances, everybody comes up, then all of a sudden other players start to play well in that with the space that he's leaving. And he's just brought back a real energy and life back into the club at the perfect time for Everton.
He said when he came in, he said, I'm a much better manager now than I was when I first came into Everton, because then I was young and enthusiastic, but raw. And now I've had, and even negative experiences like the one at Manchester United, or like at times when he was at Real Sociedad and then has come through those and difficult times at West Ham. All of that, he said, has made him a better manager. And I wonder if that's what he's brought into Everton, that ability to go in and go, I don't need to, reinvent the wheel here. There was a perspective maybe that he can look at it with. Yeah,
I actually met David Moyes and spent quite a bit of time with him in the summer at the Euros. And, for me, I've just watched what he's done, following football as a fan, and you never know what someone's going to be like on a personal level. But he was really open. You could see his passion for the game. You could see how much he was, the detail and the level he went to, and it was fascinating to just get to do that and have that insight. But I'm just genuinely so happy that he's managed to do this for Everton, which is clearly he's got a close connection to the club. But just the way he was probably treated towards the end at West Ham. He did an enormous job there. Fantastic to get them silverware in Europe. And I think there was a lot of good things that Sean Dyche had done that had, laid the foundations. I think he's just used that experience, as you've said, and he's just, galvanised the players a little bit, given them a little bit more confidence and encouragement. And they have enough good players with experience as well as, the tactical and technical detail to get results. He's managed to get that out of them.
It's the confidence not to try and do too much, which at times maybe is an accusation that could be levelled at a younger, less experienced manager like an Enzo Maresca, who's making all those changes with that huge group of players. I know he's narrowed it down to his playing squad, but it's still a huge group of players and quite an imbalanced squad, very imbalanced squad as well, which maybe, as we look towards what's coming up for these teams at the end of the season, Chelsea's away form in particular, I know the draw was at Stamford Bridge this time around, but their away form in particular has been really poor. It means that Chelsea find themselves in a, having been talked about as maybe even title challengers, not necessarily seriously at one stage of the season, but they're now talking about dropping out of the top 5.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one with Chelsea because the narrative in and around December was, could this team be the real deal? And ever since December, we're seeing a very young squad and a young manager. But most importantly, we're seeing that the cracks are really showing. I mean, dropping 5 points to Ipswich is unacceptable for a club of Chelsea's magnitude, whether they've got a young squad or not. I mean, if you bounce those points in, you're probably safely within the top 4. And it's about capitalising on moments which this club hasn't done. And I think what the bigger issue is that Chelsea in reality need Champions League football because of where they are financially. But the narrative of it is equally as spooky. You have a team in Newcastle in terms of their project will go in to win a trophy and potentially get Champions League. Just a few years ago, it didn't look like those clubs would be in the same discussion in that sense. So it is a really, really precarious time for Chelsea because the games and the fixtures coming up are not easy, and you've not maximised on the games where you should pick up points. And now, a lot of those young players are looking around and looking for a leader to say, like, how do you do this? How do we galvanise? And I don't necessarily know that there's someone in there with the lived experience of having done it before.
They haven't got anyone in there, Mayowa.
And that's the problem. That
is exactly the problem, because even when you I listened to his interview again this morning, Kels, and he's almost blaming the crowd for not being patient with the team, and they're a young team, for them playing out the back. And so he's upset with the goalkeeper because then the goalkeeper locked it long. And then they scored a goal. And I think that any manager that starts now pointing the finger and bringing the fans in, it's dangerous ground to do that, because he needs experience in that team, and it's something that should have been recognised a long time ago. Because if you've got a couple of experienced players in that team, they will be able to settle those guys down on the pitch to say, don't worry about the fans, let them moan, we'll carry on playing, and they'll see that what we're trying to do is going to get us, it's going to reap our rewards. They didn't wait, and now he's said that. And when you look at his managerial record, was it Parma he was at?
So Parma, he had a blip. They released him. Leicester, second half of the season, big blip. Chelsea, it seems to be replicating itself.
It's not a good pattern. It's not a good pattern, Kels, because for some reason something happens halfway through the season for him, and he's been moved on. I don't know how long Chelsea are going to be able to.
There's a rhythm to his season.
Yeah, there does seem to be that, and then for him to say that again, if I'm upstairs, I wouldn't be happy hearing him talking about the fans like that. And if I'm the fans, I wouldn't be happy with him trying to blame us. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one pans out, because I think that Chelsea, like you said earlier, Mayowa, they with their wage bill and with everything, they have to be in the Champions League.
But they may also need to look at one or two exceptions to that buy young, long contract. Yeah. Let them develop at the club, just to bring a bit of balance to the squad in terms of their experience profile. Let's take a look then at a massive graphic. If you're watching, you might want to pause this one. Here's everybody who we think has got a chance of finishing in the top 5. So from 3rd to 7th, this is who they've got. They all play each other at various stages and in various combinations. Of these, how many teams are there? 5. Of these 5 teams, with 6 to 7 games left to go, what are we thinking? Who's got a tough run in? Who should be relatively straightforward? I'm sort of looking at Manchester City's as relatively straightforward in there.
Nice.
No, I think Newcastle's running's good. I think all those home games, they
Chelsea and Villa don't have a nice one, do they, either?
No.
Chelsea's one is.
I think that Forest Chelsea last game of the season, that could be
tasty.
that
Forest.
last spot.
You look at Forest now, and that race. You look at Tottenham, with Forest and what I'm seeing them at the moment with that game I saw the other day, Kels. If I'm one of those teams, I probably fancy going to Forest, except for Leicester, probably. But I'd fancy whether I had to play Forest, whether it's home or away, I'd be happy with that. I wouldn't want to be playing Newcastle around this time because they're just like still like high on the league, winning the cup, I should say. Yeah. So they're not a team you want to be playing at home, but like.
So we've got Newcastle Villa to come. We've got Manchester City against Villa to come. We've got, what else is in there? Forest against Chelsea is still to come. I mean, there's even like Chelsea against Newcastle still. There's so many different sort of combinations in there and so many different twists and turns. Yeah. So it would be cruel to ask for predictions.
No.
Despite that. Of the way it stands right now, with all the caveats that this can all change because they're all playing each other, who do you think are going to be the 2 and 6th and 7th come the end of the season?
You know something? Can I just say 6th and 7th?
Who are they going to be?
It's probably them two there.
You think it's going to be Chelsea and Villa miss out?
Yeah, unless something happens with Villa.
A different combination of Forest, Newcastle and City potentially in the league in 3rd, 4th, 5th.
Unless Forest completely capitulate and Villa can I think that in those games, if Villa can find, I think they could maybe sneak Forest out. I don't know. But I don't feel like Forest are going to hang in. So you're saying Newcastle
and City almost definitely?
Yes.
And then it's one of, are you going Forest or Chelsea or Forest or Villa? Who are the...
See, I
Forest
think...
Go on, Rach.
I just think Newcastle could end up, if they go into that Chelsea, Arsenal, Everton finish, that could just be really tricky.
Yeah.
I think...
That's a tough last 3, isn't it, for Newcastle?
I think City are definitely in. I think if Newcastle manage to capitalise on their game in hand, it gives them a little bit of a cushion to work with.
Yeah, but Villa got Newcastle and City.
The issue is I don't see Chelsea going on a run. I don't know. Chelsea have not shown anything since December that they'll be capable of going on a run in these last few games. Newcastle, Liverpool, Everton. Fulham gave them a good game as well. So it's... Surprisingly, with Chelsea and Villa, they both have to play United, and you don't know what United's going to turn up. United could probably be a banana skin, or maybe lose their points a little bit.
You look at Villa, though. Villa, the last 3 games, I could see them winning all of those.
Yeah.
I could see Villa winning all of those games, and then you look at, like you rightly said, Rach, you look at like Newcastle. They've got Chelsea, Arsenal, and Everton, depending on what's that.
I don't understand.
I don't know.
It must be because of earlier season results as well in the reverse fixtures. But Villa have got the, according to Opta, the lowest chance of finishing inside the top 5. And I think as you start to talk your way through that, you can definitely reason your way into saying, well, Villa have got a really good chance of finishing in the top 5. But do you know what we've done? We've started with one argument, worked our way all the way back around to the other one.
Yeah, they're all in.
If you were watching, then honestly, pause that, sit and try to work out all those scores and then work out where everybody ends up. Hours of fun for the whole family.